Well, very good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of everyone at Teamlease Regtech, I take this opportunity to welcome you one more time for what promises to be a wonderful session today on creating a culture of compliance in 2023. 2023 just got kicked off. We've spent about 2 weeks in the year, and I'm sure a number of you are looking to figure out how you can use some of your New Year resolutions to transform the culture of compliance in your company. Unfortunately, many of us deal with an extremely complex compliance situation, thousands of regulations across your various establishment types and locations. I have two panelists today who bring fantastic amount of experience in managing compliance in their organizations in different forms and flavors. Let me take an opportunity to welcome Nidhi Salampuria. Nidhi brings over a decade of professional experience across legal, secretarial, general business management, government affairs, and government relations. For about the last 6 years, she's been working as a director, company secretary, and general counsel with Khandelwal Group. Her work revolves around mergers and acquisitions, private equity investments, among other corporate governance proceedings. As a director of 4 organizations, she has worked extensively on managing matters related to SEBI, FEMA, RBI, intellectual property, and HUF related litigation. Nidhi is a graduate in commerce, an LLB, company secretary, and has diplomas in data privacy policy, regulations, cyber law, and cyber forensics. Welcome, Nidhi.
Thank you.
Our other panelist for today's discussion is Parikshit Pant. Parikshit is currently working as a senior assistant vice president and head of regulatory compliance, corporate secretarial, and legal at Bajaj Capital. Parikshit brings over 15 years of experience handling business compliance of joint ventures in the Asia Pacific region. He brings expertise in highlighting regulatory risk, drafting and revising company policies, advising on new product initiatives, among other corporate governance responsibilities that he serves. He has worked with compliance domain with organizations such as State Bank of India and Max Bupa. Parikshit is a CFA, an alumnus of IIM Calcutta, and a fellow at ICSI. Welcome, Parikshit.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks for having me.
Well, creating a culture of compliance is often on the minds of all company secretaries and compliance professionals. Oftentimes, it comes across as a lone role where the compliance officer is found to be accountable. It seems like a thankless job. If everything goes hunky-dory, things are going in the right direction, nobody really values the role, but anything that goes down south suddenly is compliance officer's responsibility. And the only way to solve this conundrum is to make compliance a broad-based responsibility across many different functions, many organizational leaders, and ensuring that it's not a one person's role for organization to stay on the right side of the law. That's really what we are going to talk about. Before we get into the lower level details of the conversation, let me take a minute or two, bring our viewers up to speed. What does it take to stay compliant in India? The graph that you see here, a pie chart actually, tells you that the country's regulatory environment has 1,536 unique acts and rules. Subsumed in them are 69,233 unique compliances and 6,618 filings across the law of the land. When you unpack law of the land, there are 7 broad categories led by labor, which is a concurrent subject in the Constitution. It constitutes 30% in terms of acts and 47% in terms of compliances. If I overlay the data of criminality, a whopping 68% provisions in the Indian law that carry criminality up to 10 years are in labor laws. Environment, health and safety, dealing with Environment Protection Act and all the related rules, CPCBs and PCBs, consents, registers, records, returns, payments, many kinds of compliances are sitting there. Finance and taxation, I think, does not need any explanation. Commercial deals with equipments. As a manufacturer, companies have hoists, lifts, they deal with cranes, They may have pressure vessels, boilers, tools, tackles, gas holders, fire, legal metrology oriented stuff. All of this typically fall into commercial. Many of these have one-time licensing requirements. Many of them require periodic fitness testing, statutory certifications, and so on. Secretarial is the next category there. Both our panelists today, they come with that kind of background and have been dealing with company law, MCA, SEBI, NSE, BSE, and all the obligations which are subsumed under the secretarial practices. Industry specific deals with regulatory or sectoral. So try for telecom, FSSAI for food processing, IRDAI for insurance, RBI for banking, NBFCs. All of those are sectoral regulations, and that's where those regulations go into. Let's move on and look at how the compliance map of India looks like. As you can see here, that the map, the compliance obligations at union state levels have been broken down. We don't intend to go through this, but a lot of this data has emerged with years worth of research that the teams at Teamlease Regtech have done. Moving on, compliance, just to put an image to the names, what do we mean by compliance is all statutory obligations include items like licenses, registrations, permissions, consent orders, returns, registers, challans, displays, remittances, exemptions. All of these are examples of compliance, and by no means this is a complete list. There are many others, including various kinds of committees, their operations, their charters, maintenance of records, and so on and so forth. Moving on, I just wanted to jog everyone's memory by saying that compliances are at 3 levels: union, state, and local. 7 categories which we just discussed, and 3 types: time-based, event-based, and checklisted. Checklisted basically are an ongoing bunch of compliances that don't have a start date and an end date. So with this, let me bring our panelists into the conversation today. Nidhi, let me start with you. In our earlier discussions, it's very clear that your role is very diverse. You deal with a wide variety, wide array of topics, and you have experienced compliance, both its size and complexity in your role in many different forms and shapes. So I want to bring you into the conversation today and understand from you, what is the complexity? Help our audience understand, why is compliance that complex? Why is it non-trivial?
Thank you for having me on the webinar, firstly, Rishi. I think the issue with compliance is, we all do our graduation, do the company's secretary course, and we just do some training, the 15 months or the 24 months, and then we are out in the job market. We are looking for opportunities. We get hired by our company and we start working. So primarily our education have been Companies Act, right? Our training is under a company secretary who will let you do minutes and MCA forms. Majorly it is that, right? 95% of the interns would be doing that. Then you suddenly get a job into a company wherein you are a company secretary and a compliance officer by default. And suddenly you are thrown under the bus, I will say, because you have only learned Companies Act. You have not learned POSH. You have not learned shop and establishment. You have not learned any other law apart from Companies Act over like the 3 years and a 1.5 year that you put in. Suddenly you are in the office and a BMC officer comes and asks you that, Madam, Gumasta license kahan hai? Accountant or receptionist directly aapko leke jaake samne khara kar dega. Madam, inse pucho. Now you need to know what is the applicability of the shop and establishment. You need to know what is this applicability of POSH Act even before you comply with it, right? So awareness at the basic laws which are applicable to every company, that also I think it's a problem, because of which the non-compliance happens, because nobody really, to a certain extent, the owners of the businesses or the people who are the management, they don't look at the day-to-day operations at this level. They are busy managing the business, which is important for them. So the priority for them is different than the priority for the compliance officer. So I think these basic trainings also need to be inculcated. So when we say we have a MSOP or we have a training of 15 days or 10 days before you clear your CS course, these are the basic things which also need to be taught, I think. Plus,
it's funny you mentioned that, and you might notice that I am smiling all the way while you speaking, this. And why I am smiling here is because I went to one of the premier institutes to do my business management in the country. I am Calcutta, and we finished the entire MBA and got a degree at the end. And later on, I realized that we never covered any corporate or business compliance in the entire course. So while we went through a comprehensive training on how to run the business, we hardly got any exposure to how to stay on the right side of the law. Please go ahead.
Yes, so that's how my exposure have been. I've been literally learned a lot of things on the job. So my training mostly have been in the legal department rather than a secretarial department, where I used to go in front of a BMC officer, just go like at a 22-year age, I was going and meeting BMC officers, I was going and meeting tehsildars, anything like SRA, joint development. I used to just go. There was a encroachment application I used to go and meet. There are 400 encroachers on the land. I will go stand in the between and make sure that nothing wrong is happening, call the police wala, get things done. So it's just that you have to be what I call, I would say you have to be very aggressive in terms of not saying that, oh, I'm a company secretary, I should only look at Companies Act. Baki mera kaam nahi. It doesn't work like that. If you are a compliance officer, you don't even know wherever the word compliance officer is mentioned in so many acts that the compliance officer of the company is responsible for this compliance. So you need to know, you need to read the act. You need to know what your responsibilities are. Reading the bare acts, I think, is the most crucial thing. People don't read it. The problem starts there. You get a job and job mil gaya, kaam ho gaya. Aisa nahi hota hai.
So it's interesting that early on in your career, there was so much exposure to make you street smart. And I think your confidence is reflective of the street smartness, and the kind of exposure that you got was, I think, rare. Sitting in a cabin and managing compliance is very different from, being in a government office, standing in queues, dealing with paperwork, speaking in local languages, knowing the local culture, right? And sometimes it can be an all-day affair, and you're trying to maintain.
I'll tell you, people won't talk to you if you don't know their local language. It has happened with me. I have taken my receptionist with me because she knew the local language. I told her to stand in the front. I used to tell her in Hindi. She used to translate and talk to the officer. That's how I have got my job done at certain locations. So yes, local language, local laws to bahut baat ki baat hai. Local language ke bina bhi kaam nahi hota hai.
And it's very interesting because as a company, we recognize that regulatory environment is quite fluid. Law of the land changes many times a year. In fact, we are the only company over the last few years that have been tracking 2,000 plus websites across the length and breadth of the country. And many times you will come across notifications that are published in one language. If you are an officer, compliance officer responsible for the pan-India presence of the country, and you are sitting in any one location of the country regardless, there's no way you are going to know other languages, and especially so much so that you can actually translate the if, may, shall, should, because in law, a lot of these words have very unique meanings, and they cannot be spoken interchangeably. So that's definitely a big area. Now, while I want to hear more from you on diversity of compliances, technicalities, irrelevant compliances, overlapping compliances, sheer multitude of types and nuanced compliances, let me bring Parikshit into the conversation. I'll come back to you, Nidhi, in a minute or two. Parikshit.
Thanks, Rishi. And great insight by Nidhi. So when you say about difficulty in facing the compliances, so I'll just slightly take it at a macro level. If I ask this question from the any forum, that do you think compliance is a business enabler, right? So some will say, like, let's say 70% yes, it's a business enabler. 20% say okay, you guys are showstopper. There are 10% who can say can't say. But this is the wrong mindset, which I have an agony towards that. Compliance is not business enabler. Compliance is business. Because at the end of the day, you think about the gaming industry, right? Now they are flourishing. And because they are flourishing, now the Ministry of Electronics and IT, they want regulations to regulate, because otherwise it will go haywire. You talk about chat GPT, one of the finest invention of 2021. Now a beautiful AI, but at the end of the day, now the even the Princeton University and some great colleges, they want it to get regulated. They want it to, someone wants it to ban. So at the end of the day, it is if someone say to me that, boss, without compliance I can go do a business, that's not happening. So compliance is number one. It's a business. And usually company hire compliance officers and people like me and Nidhi, that, okay, boss, you have to ensure the compliances. One person can't do that. That's
Yes.
very, it's a shared responsibility. Number one, it's a top-down approach. And me and Nidhi and the people like us are the officers of regulator on the payroll of the company. That's what our role is. So these are certain things which we really need to completely change the mindset of the management before getting hired, or before even hiring someone, that how you foresee compliance. Do you foresee that, okay, boss, there is a tick in the box, you do this, and it happens? Like, I'll quote you one example. I work with a company, it's a 7-8 listed company under the group. Now, what they used to do, there is a provision which came in the Companies Act that you have to have a women director if you cross certain threshold. What that company do, that they pick a sister concern, a women employee of a sister concern, and make that women as an independent director. They do the compliances, they ensured the compliances, but they had not endured the compliances. Ultimately, it is about raising the governance level. We all are talking about the compliance, but are we actually complying with the intent of the law? There are many independent directors on the board of the company who are actually not independent. Some in the other way, they are linked commercially, maybe not crossing the threshold what is prescribed in the Companies Act or the SEBI regulations, but their view and judgment is not independent. So the problem is the mindset. And companies like these RegTech companies, by bringing these webinars, these initiatives, incentivizing the front runner in the industry, we can somehow change that mindset. I see, because it's been 12 years into the industry. Initially, what was expected of me is just to prepare the paperwork. And most of the company secretaries and law grads are doing it, just paperwork. Now it is not about paperwork. Now I have to even vet the operational part of the business process. Now I have to vet the cybersecurity policy. Recently, IID extended the cybersecurity policy for the intermediaries. Now I am the one who is vetting that policy. I don't know anything about the the technical jargons and how the API work, how this backend the terminology, what it meant. But you have to read, you have to go through that, and slowly and steadily. Yes, we are being considered as an enabler, but majorly right now is still, if I talk about the Indian companies, people still show us consider as a cost center and as a kind of a showstopper. So that is the mindset challenge which I feel that I face, and people don't understand that boss, it's everyone's responsibility. I cannot go down to a branch in Darbhanga and paste the all the notices and have a fire extinguisher. I have to depend on some business guy there to do that. And the only way that he can click the photos, we ask people to click the photos and share us for vetting and validation. So that is one thing. Second is, we compliance people and legal people only think that just by defining or interpreting the law, their job is done. No, we have to go one step ahead, because in some company with good governance like SBI and GE, we have a process called compliance audit. So before internal audit, we do that compliance audit on a sample basis, just to ensure that the people are complying with it or not. So these are certain things which I think that that's completely as I again said, mindset problem, which as an industry we have to work on. Rishi.
So, Parikshit, it's very interesting. The view that you have taken is an intrinsic view within the company. You're speaking about culture, shared responsibilities,
Yes.
more and more people bringing their shoulder to the load. What I would also want to hear, and maybe I'll come back to you in a minute or two, is what are the extrinsic problems which are outside the locus of control of your organization or collectively our organizations? The regulatory environment, the fluidity, the sheer number of compliances, ambiguity in their interpretations. You're trying to comply with 90% of the regulations, you'll probably be non-compliant with certain number of regulations outside. Just the complexity of the ecosystem is the other thing that as compliance professionals we deal with. And I'll come back to you with that question in a few minutes. Let me bring Nidhi back into the conversation. So Nidhi, you heard Parikshit talk about one facet of compliance management, which brings complexity. Your views?
Yes, he's very right. It is a top-down responsibility. It is a shared responsibility, because I would never know what's happening in the second or the third subsidiary, because I don't go there every day, right? So I'm dependent on people for information flowing into me, basis which I would figure out what is applicable to me, what is not applicable to me. So I would put it in terms of a shared responsibility. When you say, I would say even the systems which are used within a company has to be shared between departments. So for example, like you have a cross-functional team doing a transaction. Similarly, the audit or the compliance is also a cross-functional responsibility. Because I'll give you a classic example, a related party transaction. Forget listed companies, even in private companies, the accountant doesn't even know who's a related party. He'll just go ahead and give a resolution needed. He'll just go ahead and make a payment that is needed. And then after that, you come to at the end of the year, oh my God, this has been done. Now, how do we do it? Right? So if there was a system, so a lot of companies which are private limited but are big, they do use ERP, they do use SAP, all of that, right? To take care of their accounting needs so that they are not falling behind GST, tax, TDS, EPF, whatever they have. However, if you see those modules which they use, they don't give a trigger to them, oh, that this transaction is a related party transaction. So I think it has to go till that level. For that, it basically enables the accountant, it informs the accountant that yes, before going ahead, this seek approvals. So it's not wrong that they're doing the transaction.
What you're basically saying is, even if you have an intent to comply, sometimes just the sheer lack of processes and transparency in reporting or flagging transactions that this transaction may put you on the wrong side of the law may not be there.
Yes, because the moment you put a wrong password, it gives you a hint, right? Your email account. Similarly, when you're entering into a wrong transaction, the implementation should be done at the year beginning or whenever there's any change, and it should give you a prompt that you are entering into this, whether you have approval. You click yes, then you know who has gone ahead and did the non-compliance. Right now, there's only one person you have to catch, compliance officer, but compliance officer ko to pata nahi ki transaction ho gaya hai. Right, but the default and the penalties and the non-compliance is always the responsibility of the compliance board. के सामने तो compliance officer को जाके बोलना है, boss, we have done this wrong, we are going for compounding, we are going for penalties. So that's the issue.
So basically, where I'm hearing you talk is there is complexity being created as a result of ecosystem parameters, a lot of compliances. Complexity gets created based on Parikshit's input on culture of compliance and whether founders, promoters, they want to cleanly stay on the right side of the law or work in a little bit of a gray area. Chalta hai, hota hai, dekh lenge, manage kar lenge, jab hoga tab dekha jayega, sort of a situation. Third, even if you have the right intention, your heart is in the right place, you may not have the systems to flag non-compliances in a timely manner. So you will detect things only after the damage has been done, and now you are in a damage control mode. Excellent. Parikshit.
So, Rishi, that brings a very interesting, situation I faced, because Nidhi brings that RPT thing. So there was one company, it's a very, old family-driven company, and the veterans are there in the accounts department, right? Who are grads, accounts grad, but strong knowledge, domain knowledge, but not used to the recent regulation and Companies Act. So I just asked that gentleman that how you do that transaction. It's an RPT. Do you take my approval and do you take board's approval? Is it at an ordinary person arm's length? So that fellow came to me and I'm following up with him. So he came to my seat. So the Parikshit ji, ordinary course to theek hai, samajh aa gaya, but ye arms ko naap ke kaise price nikalenge? So that was the understanding of the people in the organization, that they even don't know the jargons on day-to-day basis they are working on. So that's one thing. And you highlighted a very great point about the extrinsic or exogenous factors. So I'll tell you, Rishi, I am on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, I deal with Bombay Stock Exchange, IRDA, NSC, NSDL. And I was having a call with the regulator. The regulatory bodies, they are really supportive, because in one of there was some incident which happened, and it happens, because of some external factors. So the gentleman told me, Parikshit, look, you just justify me that you have a strong control in processes. Forget the penalty, forget the non-compliance. If you are able to justify me that you have strong processes and compliances and policies, I can just do nothing with this. And we get away with that because we have the policies and we have the procedure, we have the awareness campaigns in place. So regulator always at first they take a view as a fatherly view or a motherly view, right?
Yeah.
But when you became over smart, then the exogenous problem comes into the picture. There are, yes, instances in the regulatory and in the statutory domain where there are certain under the table arrangements which are going on. But that again brings to one of my ex-bosses, GCs of a FMCG company. So he told me once, because there was a food inspecting officer, he came to our premises. He asked, the inspector asked me that, boss, itna penalty hai and itna dene se ho jayega. I went to my boss. I said, boss, look, ye ek hafta aake, he'll create a headache and he's asking for this, and can it be done in that way? So the gentleman told me, boss, let him do 60 days audit. Let him highlight all the red flags. If we have red flags, we'll pay the penalty, we'll improve our process. And if we don't have any red flag, then that will really consolidate and or resolve that, okay, the processes are fine. So that's a way to do it. Another HOD I work with, he told me a very great, interesting and, theory of his, that, look, Parikshit, I work in a fashion, if I can, by penalizing 1 CR, I can do a 10 CR business, I'll go with 10 CR. So that's a different approach of people in the industry. But I'm personally a kind of person who always take the most conservative view when it comes to law. So, but in terms of external, the regulator are more aggressive than us. You see the news, the RBI is working on this bank account operability. Even the MCA V3 version is such a real-time version that you will get show cause notices, demand notices automatically. So they are already ahead of us. It is just we have to catch up with them, and that's the challenging part. And convince the senior management that, boss, the regulator is already 1-2 step ahead of us, and they are just not doing or taking action for maybe for the ease of doing a kind of a thing. And then there is a lobby which might be created that, okay, the business nahi karne de rahe hain. So that's why they are taking a considerate view. But at the end of the day, regulator authorities are always ahead of us.
So basically, one clear thing, Parikshit, that is coming out is there are many cultural issues, not just within the company, but as a country also.
As a country also.
In the last 10-15 years, even where I operate from, in the vantage point that I have luckily had, I have seen that this culture is starting to shift gradually.
And Rishi, just sorry to cut you in, I'll just throw a small example. Just suppose you cross the traffic light and the traffic police has stopped you. वो बॉस सीट बेल्ट नहीं लगाया था, 1000 रुपए चलान. आप negotiate करेंगे 100 में, 200 में, and आप निकल जाएंगे. Usually 90% of the people do that. So that's ingrained in our DNA. Even the traffic police stand after the traffic signal, whereas he should be before the traffic signal, because he's a compliance manager of the road. So that's the job. That's our job. That's
the only difference is now with technology, the world is changing. There are video cameras. Automatically, it is getting detected. Yes. People are receiving automatic challans. So the traffic cop or the negotiation that was involved is now a little bit out of the way. Yes. Obviously, something that got created over decades will not be overdone or outdone in matter of days or weeks.
Agreed.
But I think that direction has already started setting in. Lot more companies I come across, they want to stay on the right side of the law. They want to do the right thing. But as they always say, hope is not a strategy. Just hoping that you will stay compliant is not going to get you there, right? You need the right convergence of people, process, and technology to bring you there. Now, Nidhi, before we wrap up this portion of our conversation, and some really interesting points have come out, I do want to invite you to see if you have any specific anecdotes while at any of the government offices during the course of your many years, and share it with our audience on how, you know, the gory experience of getting stuff done, especially in the real India on the ground.
So I'll give you one example. I did not have to visit a government office for that, but you know, trademarks we register, right? So my company had 40 trademarks which had to be renewed. This is in 2017, right? It's a subsidiary, right? So one of the companies wanted to renew trademarks, and the application came to us from the accounts team that we want to renew these trademarks. The cost is so and so. It's renewal, mind you. It's not applying for a new trademark. It's renewal of a trademark. The cost charged is 5,000 per renewal, right? I went and I'm a little tech savvy that way. I do use technology to my benefit as and when I can, to just reduce my workload. So I went ahead and checked how a renewal is done. I had done a little bit during my training time. So I said, you don't need a consultant for this. Who is the consultant? वो वहाँ का कोई licensor है, because you don't need the IPR attorneys for this. वहाँ का कोई कंसल्टेंट है, वो इजीली करके देगा. उन्होंने बोला कि मैडम क्यों फॉर्म वॉर्म भरना है, मैं करवा दूंगा, आप 5,000 रुपए पर ट्रेडमार्क देना. ट्रेडमार्क इज अ बिग थिंग फॉर अ कंपनी, राइट? ट्रेडमार्क है भाई, जाना नहीं चाहिए. तो देन 5,000 रुपए पर ट्रेडमार्क जाएगा, इतने ट्रेडमार्क है, टोटल कॉस्ट इतना आ रहा है. आई एम लाइक व्हाई? So I went ahead, I said, okay, you give me if you have a online credit card or a debit card or an online banking of a company, I'll go ahead and renew it for you. And it's done. It's a renewal. You just have to pay fees. You have to don't do anything. You don't have to do anything. You have to create a user ID. You have to pay the fees, and your renewal is complete. It's a 10-minute job. A 10-minute job, and you're willing to pay 5,000 into 40 licenses. So imagine, unawareness can cost you so much, and technology helped me get the job done in 10 minutes. So it's like you are hiring. It's like you are hiring. I'll tell you one example. My boss used to give me is, it's like you're hiring an Einstein or a scientist, and you're telling him, I don't have a budget for a blackboard for you to scribble on and understand. That's not possible to do.
Sure. So, well, देश बदल रहा है. I think बहुत सारी चीजें आज electronically होने लगी हैं, and I'm sure.
And with the startups wherein you have to go for funding and everything, you need to be like on up to date with every compliance. I don't think you can have a chalta hai attitude and say that you don't know or you were not aware. Your funding is gone for a toss if you are not up to date with it. All the startup, the VC funds, the private equity are very strict on compliances. Very, very strict on compliances.
Sure. Well, we are about 30 minutes into the conversation. We do need to switch gears now, and instead of just talking about the problems that we have, we will talk about the solutions and how we can deal with some of these problems, and how our panelists today have dealt with them in their current roles or past lives. But before we do that, a couple of things. One, we have a very healthy participation from our audience today. Many of them are compliance professionals from many large companies across the country. I do invite you to ask any specific questions to our panelists. There is a Q&A section from where you can put in the questions. We will come to these questions towards the end of our conversation today. So I do invite you to participate in the discussion, share your comments, share your questions, and we will get to them as we get closer to the end of the conversation. But let's move forward. Let me start with Parikshit. Parikshit, we spoke about a number of problems, and the reason we are all there, the technology systems, the people, the processes are all there, is to make sure that in spite of these problems, companies stay compliant. Share some of the experiences with us. What have you done in your current and the previous roles? What do you think works really well, and how should our audience take a cue from your experience?
In my experience, because I have worked with companies from like 10 departments, companies having 10 departments and companies having 40 to 50 departments. So in both the setup, what I felt the major problem is that somehow the personality is like that, or I don't know, the environment is like that. They treat us as they are someone who's sit in the corner of the office and there is a Chinese wall. You can't talk to compliance. Compliance people don't talk to you. They are no nonsense people. Boss kahin kuch bol diya ulta seedha, so they'll quote that thing to the management and blah blah. So first of all, what we do in large setups like, because I work with SBI card, and SBI used to be the joint venture with GE Capital in, the credit card business. So there we establish, the trust. We have, coffee sessions, like coffee with SMT, senior management team, coffee with leaders. We bring the teams into the boardroom who has concern. There are one-on-one session with the compliance head. There are, awareness training campaigns we do. And over those informal casual catch-up, we try to understand their problem, that why they are unable to do it. And ultimately, we found out that there is no budget problem. There is no managerial problem. It is only in 95% cases, the clarity they need from the compliances that boss, this is how we have to do it. So sometimes they have this, thing that, don't go to compliance. They'll just, say no to this proposal, or they'll not provide the solution. But it is not like that. So, one-on-one personal touch is, yes, very important. Back in those companies, and companies like, Max, compliance tool really help us a lot. Earlier, I myself used to have, the CAT approach. We have a compliance activity tracker, which I manually used to prepare, manually used to update the regulations, laws, circulate everything. But with those, automation, it really helps us to, map the task at an activity level, spot out the performer and reviewer and the function head. The whole, particular activity is going through 3 layers. Finally, a certificate is generated. The function head is vetting that certificate, and it is ultimately submitted to our holding company. So that's the kind of, the way where technology really helps us. Because you consider a scenario of 40 functions and pan-India presence, millions of customers, crores of transactions on a daily basis. How it's completely humanly, it's not possible. So bringing technology along with a personal touch, because usually sometimes people do that. There's no personal touch. Like, for example, if there is someone who is at the metro station and giving you the sanitizer spray, compared to the thing that there is just a machine for this hand sanitization. So usually there is more probability that people will sanitize where there is a human touch. So I'm not saying that just weed out it's all automation or all human. There has to be proper blend between the two. So that's how I in my personal experience are able to. Sometimes a catch up with a business function or a functional leader, just for a hi hello thing, and breaking that conversation, that really help us to understand the psyche of an organization.
Sure. Now, before I bring Nidhi back into the conversation, Parikshit, Pushpesh Ranjan, who's one of our audience today, he has asked a very pointed question to you. I think he's picked on a sentence you quoted earlier where you said compliance is business. And his question is, don't you agree that the compliance is a commitment rather than a business? Would you want to address that quickly?
No, he is right. It's a commitment, but commitments are bound to be broken at the end of the day. If you'll say, because when it comes to commitment, there is because I might go a bit philosophical now, but when you say commitment, so you are taking it very hard on yourself. मैंने commit कर दिया, अब तो हो ही नहीं सकता, मैं यहाँ पे खड़ा हो गया, तो line यहीं से शुरू हो गई. So it is a commitment. Yes, I agree. He is right. The gentleman is right. But at the end of the day, you have to understand, unless and until we will not market us that, okay, we are business. Because when I say we are business, I'm trying to say that without us, you can't do business. Without complying, you will be under the regulatory watch. There is a reputational risk, and this will be your bottom line can shrink, share, stock prices goes a tailspin. So by saying that compliance is his business, that business can't run without compliance. So that is the thing. You can do compliance without business. Like, for example, I'll tell you one interesting example. I was in a company, there are 33 companies. Some are not profitable companies, but still a profitable company is doing the same number of compliance, and I am also doing the same number of compliances. So you can do your activity without business, but business can't do about you. So that's what when I say that compliance is business.
Excellent. Well, let me bring Nidhi into the picture. Nidhi, what should our audience think about? How should they rethink their compliance? How can they create a culture? Because interestingly, many of the points mentioned today are around a culture of compliance. The appetite that founders, promoters, management, board have towards compliance, the kind of decision making, kind of resources that they want to allocate, whether compliance is an afterthought or it is a part of the DNA. All of these are very cultural in nature. Your thoughts on how our audience should think about recreating this culture?
So I would tell you that whenever, see, in India, I've read some of the questions. In India, a lot of businesses are family driven, right? So when you see the next generations coming in, or when you see how they approach business, everybody wants their kids to have a knowledge of finance. You will see that they appoint mentors to teach their kids finance. You would never see them appoint a mentor or someone in their company or from outside teaching them the legality involved with the business. That's never done. I've never seen it. So when you teach your kids how to take over a business, or when the promoter family is planning succession, I think a team which is helping the next generation take over should not just be a finance mentor or auditors or a management consultant. It should also have a legal person there which can help that what are the things your businesses need to comply with. Because, for example, today, if I am a company which is into a business of, for example, FMCG products, but tomorrow I want to add an alcohol business to my business, because it's the same set of the customers, I will say, why won't I sell alcohol to them? I'll just buy an alcohol business and start selling alcohol also, because nowadays in a general kirana store, you can store beers, right? So I might say I have a distribution channel, let me start doing it. But the licensing requirements are different. You miss that part altogether while making your financial plan or your business plan or your acquisition strategy. So those are very important things. And second thing, it's like the culture of compliance can be built, I think, wherein the company secretary or the compliance officer of the company has a direct reporting to the management and the board, and not to the CFO or the accounts or the finance controller. Because what happens is, we all know there are Chinese whispers. We all know there is filtration of information before it reaches to the board. It's not done intentionally. It's not about being biased. It's just how different layers of information function. Because, for example, if I am a CFO and I'm talking to the board, if I have a 1 hour time with the board, 15 minutes of that will go into finance information, right? The budget, the MIS, the variance analysis, everything. Last 10 minutes, I will say, okay, what the company secretary has mentioned, 1 or 2 points, what I think is priority will be taken over. So if you have a direct face-to-face meeting with the board or direct reporting to the board, it will help the board notice the importance and the urgency of the matter, and it will give you, and when you have a face-to-face interaction, you add value to what you say, because you are also prepared that much. So listening from the horse's mouth, like we say, is more important than having a Chinese whisper saying, oh, this has to be done. Because in India, when COVID happened, we were all sitting till the government happened. We said, because government never said directly anything that we are doing a lockdown. So we were thinking, okay, it's happening in Dubai, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in China. When it comes to India, we'll see. But companies who had management has foreseen it, they saw how it is impacting and probably started a little bit of precaution or started planning ahead, had a little less blow due to COVID, then inherently like wipe out or shut down completely. So I think being ahead in your field, whatever field you are in, like we are in compliance and law, it's very important for you to be able to do well and set a culture tone, because it's only slowly it will start building up, right? Maybe not this generation, next generation of the promoters. And I mind you, the next generation of promoters which are coming in a lot of family business, they're all wanting professionals on board. They're not dealing with the typical Munimji or the typical accounts wala guy. They want professionals on the board because they don't want to be, because they also know that the regulators are becoming very aggressive and strict when they have to send notices or put penalties. Mind you, the penalty for a company secretary is 5,000 rupees per day if you don't appoint a company secretary. That amounts to 1.5 lakhs a month. 1.5 lakhs is a very big salary for a company secretary. I'll tell you, no fresher company secretary will very easily get this salary. But the penalty is 1.5 lakhs. And it takes, I think it would take minimum 3 to 4 years to reach 1.5 a month. So that's the culture gap, I will say. Because you don't think it's a check in the box, I'll say. For initially, it's a check in the box. Then when the culture keeps growing, it will become a norm then.
So Nidhi, while we are with you, there is a specific question that Parikshit Pant, who's one of our folks in the audience, has asked, that being on the compliance, being expert on the compliance is okay, but sometimes management expects from us to be an expert of finance, treasury, and some of the other domains as well. How do we get there?
It's all learning on the job. I was exposed to finance. I'm a Marwari, and I was exposed to finance pretty early in my career, a little bit. So yes, a lot of company secretaries don't know how to read a balance sheet. I can say that, but those are the basics, right? If you don't read a balance sheet, how would you figure out what's the net worth of your company? How would you figure out what's the effective capital of your company? You are relying on somebody else's expertise to tell you this is the effective capital of your company, and so this is the managerial remuneration you give, and this is the reason certain sections of LOD are applicable to you, not applicable to you. So these are the basics you need to know. For example, you say that no knowledge of law is not an excuse. You will still be jailed or prosecuted for not falling in line with the law. Similarly, these are the basic things you need to understand or need to know while you are preparing for a career in compliance or a career in and basic technology knowledge, how to use Word, Excel. That's a given. I mean, there's no negotiation in that.
So basically, the short answer there is please keep learning on the job.
Yes.
These jobs are evolving, the needs are evolving, the roles have changed. Parikshit mentioned it earlier. The role was just do a lot of desk-based paperwork. Today, people in these roles are participating in strategy, planning, board communication, building systems and processes. A lot of strategic elements have been added. And if you have the knowledge of finance and treasury and other functions, obviously your role becomes much meatier, much bigger, much wider, and
Yes.
the dependence of the company on your capabilities will grow dramatically.
Yes.
So there are a couple of other questions. One of them is from Geeta. Geeta, thank you for that question. Her question is, where can we get a list of compliance? There is no one place where you can get a list of compliance, Geeta. During my conversations with legislative and executive functions of the government at all levels, including union and state, I have brought it up constantly to break the information asymmetry between the government and the employer. Today, we do that job when clients use our products, depending on who they are, how they've been set up, what business, what technology, what materials, what systems do they use. We do the applicability assessment. I'm sure there are other companies in the country who do applicability assessment based on the specific business that you do, because it's a cross-functional subject. So there is no one place you can find this list, but it's not too expensive. It's not too difficult. You engage with the right set of partners who bring the depth of expertise, and you should be able to get this list. Another question is from Pushpesh Ranjan. He says that this question is directed to me. He says we see a picture of compliance, including a global perspective. The question is how much time it takes India to go forward to a faceless compliance matrix wherein no police wala or regulator bargain over the compliance matters, and how much time will it take to get out of the mindset of dekh lenge chalta hai. Pushpesh ji, great question, lot of optimism in your question. And 10 years ago, if somebody had said that a sabzi wala will accept a 10 rupees payment initiated from your phone, I'm sure all three of us here would have just wished that desire aside. Today, it's a reality. We see billions of transactions happening on digital systems within the country. We are ambitious on the digital front. Our Prime Minister has put an agenda of becoming a $1 trillion economy shortly. Digital economy, $1 trillion digital economy. So I'm sure in days and weeks and months to come, more and more digitization will continue to happen. I wanted to let you know that under the aegis of FICCI Regtech initiative, Madam Madhvi Puri Butch inaugurated a platform for SEBI compliance automation towards a faceless, presenceless, and cashless SEBI compliance. And while it is not the end of the road, well begun is half done. These are clear intents of the regulator to go digital. to embrace digital technologies, both at the employer level as well as the ecosystem level and their own levels. Nidhi gave many examples where regulators are becoming much sharper in their focus, much smarter in their analytics. And when they send a notice today, that notice is just not a wishful notice. There's a lot of data that has gone into it for event correlation. So I think the ball is in motion and it is continuing to gather momentum along the way. Prime Minister talks about ease of doing business. Most of the ministers, most of the bureaucrats today, if you listen to their speeches, the word ease of doing business has become a prominent one. Digitization continues to occupy a lot of mind space of India. So in months and years to come, this direction is only going to be strengthened, and more things will happen in a cashless, paperless and presenceless mode. How much time? I think time will tell, but everything is moving faster than we imagined. I mean, nobody thought India would roll out 5G so quickly. Nobody thought 300 billion monthly digital payments will happen via apps. Nobody thought 800 million Indians would be connected to high-speed 4G and 5G networks so quickly. Nobody thought 220 crore vaccinations will be administered to all the residents and citizens of India in such a brief amount of time. So things are moving rapidly. When this will happen, I can't tell you, but I can tell you one thing: the intent of the government is in the right place. The direction of travel is definitely the right one. The speed of travel is certainly increasing. So I'm hoping, and I'm an optimist by nature, I'm hoping that soon we will see a lot of these things become a reality. Okay, coming back to our topic, there is another question, and I think, Parikshit, I would like to bring you into this. There are still some big companies, including listed companies, which are family driven, and for them, appointment of company secretary is mandatory thing, and they generally think that a CS has no work to do. How can this thinking be changed? And Nidhi, feel free to chime in if you would like to take that, but that's a question from one of our anonymous attendees. I would like any one of you to take that question.
So, see, that is, I don't know which promoter and which founder think that way, even the secretarial part. So when we talk about compliance, usually company secretaries are just focused on the secretarial part. So even if the secretarial part it is, right now, SEBI LODR, SEBI debt listing obligations are so much of time-bound activity that even to conduct 4 board meetings in a year, a company secretary has to be on their toes. I used to be in the companies where we used to sit like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, preparing the agenda, dispatching within time, taking the acknowledgements. So, my dear friend, if some family officer has certain kind of input, then you are in the wrong ecosystem. So you need to change that ecosystem, either their mindset or, see the world. But at the end of the day, it is not like that. Even the secretarial compliances are, there are huge compliances right now. SEBI specifically is really, they are very, prominent as a watchdog, and they do watch. So even a delay of 1 day in the score to redress a grievance can you will land up into a show cause notice from SEBI. So that is my take.
So Rajesh Kumar has 2 questions. In an organization, who's responsible for compliance management is his first question. And then he says, what is the difference between corporate and regulatory compliance? Happy for any one of you to take that.
So compliance management, if you have to say one name in a company who is responsible, it will be the compliance officer and the company secretary, right? When you say what is the difference between corporate compliance and regulatory compliances? So for example, if your company is in a FMCG business, I would say that the corporate compliance would be MCA, SEBI, LODR, the SAST or the PIT regulations majorly. When you say regulatory, these are also regulators, but sector-specific regulator, which will be applicable irrespective of the fact whether you're a private limited or a public limited or a listed or unlisted or a organized or like a private partnership firm. The regulatory compliance would still be applicable. For example, you would need a FSAI license, you would need a shop and establishment license for the compliance that you do. For example, if you have employees which is like more than 10, a POSH is applicable to you. So these are different regulators who monitor different activities and different sectors. For example, FEMA, if you are in a particular type of industry, you have to see what are the sectoral investment allowed under FEMA. It may vary from industry to industry. What is applicable to me may not be applicable to another company. So those are the kind of regulatory compliances. And mind you, everything comes to the compliance office. You need to know what are the sectoral regulations applicable to you. So just read it before being in any company in a particular sector. Just read it. Read the BEAR Act, read the notification, read the latest rules. Just reading never stop. In syllabus, when we were giving exams, we could omit certain things. Okay, we will leave these 2 marks question, but here you cannot. You have to read anything, everything that is available on the table.
So I think Rajesh, Nidhi is very, very clear on the approach. She has said it twice on the discussion today that read the BEAR Act. So read.
I'll tell you, I have saved 36 lakh rupees by just reading a BEAR Act for one line, and I've saved like 25% of a property from going to another person in a property matter just by reading the BEAR Act. 25% is a huge number, I think, for a property which is like a South Bombay property. So I'll tell you, reading BEAR Acts gives you a lot of clarity,
So knowledge is empowering, and please go and read these acts, BEAR Acts, read the language. It will give you deep insights into the length, breadth, and width of the regulatory boundaries. And I think that's a great answer, Nidhi. We have a question from Anuja Chakraborty. Considering quite a few regulations are now redundant or not practical, how do we deal with them? Now, while I'll get any one of our panelists to talk about it, Anuja, my short answer is if a regulation is still applicable, then there is no option there. You have to comply with it, whether you like it, whether it's redundant, whether it is, outside the relevance and so on and so forth. If it is applicable, I don't think you have a choice, but I'll leave it to our panelists who are experts on the subject to chime in.
So one way to do it, Rishi, is if you really feel it is redundant and know where it is landing you up, there is always a procedure called representing to the authority. We do that. There are certain regulations which we find that now that since the digital age has come so early thanks to pandemic, that the insurance companies who are thinking of digitizing their companies for like 5, 6, 7 years down the line, now they have digitized in 6 to 8 months. After that, we found that taking wet signature is redundant. Let's say, for an example, we represented to the authority and the authority gave the exemption. They gave the relaxation. So if you find really genuinely you feel you represent to the authority, represent to the educate forums like banking association or insurance associations, and if it actually is redundant, then they'll repeal or they'll amend it.
Excellent. Well, Anuja, hopefully you have a reprieve. There is a clear way out. There are processes to establish that. There is another question: being hired for compliance, sometimes the expectation of the employers are to find ways to escape the statutory complexity, most probably in labor and industrial laws. Any one of the two.
I think it's you can only escape. I will say it. You can only escape if you know the law. You cannot escape. You will make a blunder of yourself if you have not read the law properly. So reading of the law, interpreting it in the right way, reading between the fine lines, that's how you can escape it. And you can do it in certain places. You can figure out the applicability for yourself, non-applicable, only if you are reading the law. So that's reading and application of that knowledge that you have is the way to be able to escape certain laws. It's not escape, I will say, it's not much in the legal fraternity, but or in the compliance fraternity, but it's said very widely in the tax regime, in the tax consultants, that tax evasion is a crime. Tax planning is not a crime. So I think something similar can come in our field also, wherein if you're planning, you're reading, you know the application and you can justify the applicability or escape word that the viewer have used. You can do that only if you know your subject very well. Otherwise, not.
I think the answer there is evasion and avoidance are two different words.
Yes.
You can always work legally towards avoidance, not evasion.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it. There are a few other questions which I think we've covered in some form and shape. There is an anonymous attendee who's saying there are still some big companies, including listed companies. I think we've answered this. And there is one where it says there are many compliances which get covered 2/3 or more regulatory in between them, but on compliance management solutions, we need to furnish separate documents. How to deal with this, that a central reporting we get assured of both regulatory together with a single reporting. I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, but I think your question is that if you use a compliance management solution, you will need to put an evidence of this document into the solution. And yes, I mean, that is certainly there. If you have to use any technology solution, you will need to put in the evidence. The system is not going to gather, and probably you're saying the system keeps this document elsewhere. Can we read from there? Yes, some of those solutions are possible. Document management systems can be integrated into compliance solutions, but always remember, every integration is expensive. Every integration is time taking. So certainly please reach out to us. We'll be happy to engage with you and figure out what your specific use case is. At the moment, we are at the top of the hour. It's 4 o'clock. In fact, 1 minute past 4. On an average, we have had over 160 participants from different walks of industry and from different parts of the country. Really delighted to have Nidhi, yourself, and Parikshit on this session. Young, dynamic, smart compliance professionals who are working optimistically to change the way their companies comply and changing the way India complies. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to more interactive discussions with both of you in the future. Our audience have been great. Lot of questions today. It shows me that they care about the topic. They are curious about it. And the moment there are experts in front of them, they want to go and get those answers. So thank you again. Loved our conversation as always. Looking forward to another round next month. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay blessed, and see you then.
Thank you.